What happens when one of Hollywood's biggest stars sits down for what should be a routine interview, only to find himself in the crosshairs of a host determined to make headlines at his expense? What you're about to witness is one of the most explosive confrontations ever captured on daytime television, where charm meets aggression, where professionalism battles personal attacks, and where a beloved actor finally says what millions of viewers have been thinking for years. Before we dive into this incredible footage, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because this story is going to leave you speechless. Trust me, you've never seen anything quite like this. Robert Downey Jr. had been booked on The View to promote his latest project. The audience was buzzing with excitement as he walked onto the set with his trademark confident smile. But Joy Behar had other plans, and from the moment the interview began, something was clearly different. "So, Robert," Joy began, her voice carrying an unmistakable edge, "you've made quite a career playing heroes, haven't you? Iron Man, Sherlock Holmes, all these characters that people look up to. But I have to ask, don't you think there's something a bit hypocritical about that?" Robert's smile faltered slightly, genuine confusion crossing his face. "Hypocritical? I'm not sure I follow, Joy. Are you asking about the characters I play? Or something else?" Joy leaned forward, her eyes fixed on Robert with calculating intensity. "Oh, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. Here you are, playing these moral heroes, these symbols of justice and righteousness. But let's talk about your real life for a minute. Let's talk about your past." The shift in the room was immediate. Robert's posture changed, his relaxed demeanor giving way to something more guarded. "My past? Joy, I've been very open about my struggles and my recovery. I've talked about that journey extensively. I thought we were here to discuss my new project." "Oh yes, your struggles," Joy said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Your very public struggles that somehow turned into this incredible comeback story. But here's what I want to know. Here's what I think our viewers deserve to hear. How do we know this whole redemption narrative isn't just another performance? How do we know the real Robert Downey Jr. isn't exactly the same person he was 20 years ago?" Robert sat back, his famous charm cracking not from weakness but from controlled anger. "Joy, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and assume that you're asking this question because you genuinely care about authenticity and not because you're trying to create a moment for television. But let me be very clear about something. My recovery, my personal growth, my family, these aren't performances. These are the most real parts of my life." Joy leaned back with a smirk. "But that's exactly what someone would say if they were performing, isn't it? Look, I'm not trying to be mean here, but let's be honest with our audience. You've built an entire second career on this comeback story, this transformation from troubled actor to beloved hero. That's a very convenient narrative, don't you think? Very marketable." Whoopi cleared her throat uncomfortably while Sarah shifted in her seat, but Joy pressed on. "And another thing, let's talk about your politics for a minute. You play these American heroes, these patriotic characters, but then you stay suspiciously quiet when it comes to real political issues. What's that about? Are you afraid of alienating your fan base? Is that part of the performance too?" Robert's jaw tightened. "Joy, I think you're conflating several different things here. And frankly, I'm starting to wonder, what the real agenda island? Are we here to have a conversation about my work, or are you trying to create some kind of controversy? Because if it's the latter, I think our viewers deserve to know that." For the first time, Joy looked slightly off balance. "I don't have an agenda. I'm just asking the questions that I think people want answered. You're a public figure, Robert. You've made millions of dollars playing heroes. I think it's fair to ask whether the person behind those characters is as heroic as the roles would suggest." "Fair to ask?" Robert repeated, his voice growing sharper. "Joy, let me ask you something. When you wake up in the morning and decide to come to work and tear down someone who's here as your guest, do you consider that heroic? When you take someone's lowest moments and weaponize them for daytime television ratings, is that your version of heroism?" "I'm not tearing you down," Joy shot back defensively. "I'm holding you accountable." "Accountable for what exactly?" Robert's voice was rising now, his composure finally starting to crack. "For getting sober? For rebuilding my life? For being honest about my mistakes? You want to talk about performance, Joy? Let's talk about this performance right here, where you pretend to be a journalist while you're really just trying to humiliate a guest on live television." "Now wait just a minute," Joy interrupted, her face flushing red. "I've been doing this job for years, and I don't need some Hollywood actor telling me how to conduct an interview." "Then maybe you should start acting like you know how to do your job," Robert fired back without missing a beat. "Because right now you're not interviewing me, you're attacking me. There's a difference, And frankly, I think your viewers are smart enough to see it. Joy's voice became shrill. I am asking legitimate questions about your character, about your authenticity. The public has a right to know who they're idolizing. The public? Robert laughed, but there was no humor in it. Joy, the public already knows who I am. They've watched me stumble, fall, get back up, and rebuild my entire life. They've seen me be a father, a husband, a professional who shows up and does the work. What they're seeing right now is you trying to tear that down because, what, you're having a slow news day? That's not what this is about, Joy protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Then what is it about? Robert demanded. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you brought me here under false pretenses so you could ambush me with personal attacks disguised as journalism. And honestly, Joy, that says a lot more about your character than anything you're trying to dig up about mine. The studio fell silent except for the hum of cameras. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Robert leaned forward, his eyes blazing with an intensity that reminded everyone why he'd been so compelling on screen. You know what, Joy? You want to know about the real Robert Downey Jr.? Here, Island, I'm someone who made terrible mistakes, owned them, and spent years doing the hard work to become better. I'm someone who believes in second chances because I've lived one. And right now, I'm someone who's watching a talk show host forget what hospitality means because she's more interested in creating a viral moment than treating her guest with basic human decency. Joy's face went from red to crimson as Robert's words hung in the air. The other co-hosts looked mortified, but Joy wasn't backing down. If anything, being called out seemed to make her double down on her aggression. Don't you dare lecture me about decency, Joy snapped, her voice becoming sharper and more defensive. I've been in this business longer than you've been acting, and I know how to ask tough questions. If you can't handle real journalism, maybe you should stick to your scripted movie lines. Robert's eyebrows shot up, and a dangerous smile played at the corners of his mouth. Real journalism? Joy, is that what you call this? Because I've been interviewed by actual journalists, 60 Minutes, respected news programs, and somehow they managed to ask challenging questions without resorting to personal attacks and gotcha tactics. This isn't a personal attack, Joy protested, but her voice was getting higher and more strained. This is accountability. You can't just waltz in here with your charm and your smile and expect us to ignore the legitimate questions about your past and your politics. My politics? Robert laughed, and this time there was genuine amusement mixed with disbelief. Joy, you want to talk politics? Let's talk politics. Let's talk about how you just spent the last 10 minutes trying to character assassinate someone based on things that happened decades ago, things I've been completely transparent about. Is that your political philosophy? Attack and destroy rather than discuss and understand? Whoopi finally tried to intervene. Maybe we should take a step back here and... But Joy cut her off. No, Whoopi, this is important. Robert, you make millions playing Captain America adjacent characters, wrapped in the flag, standing for truth and justice. But when real issues come up, when there are actual injustices happening in this country, where are you? Where's your voice? Robert's expression shifted, becoming more serious. Where's my voice? Joy. I donate millions to charities. I support veterans organizations. I work with environmental groups. I just don't feel the need to turn every interview into a political rally. But since you brought it up, let me ask you something. What injustices are you fighting when you ambush guests on your own show? What truth are you serving when you twist someone's recovery story into a weapon against them? I'm serving the truth that the public deserves to know who they're worshiping. Joy shot back. You've created this image of yourself as this reformed, perfect family man, but people have a right to know if that's real or just another Hollywood creation. Another Hollywood creation? Robert's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. Joy, my son is sitting at home right now, probably watching this with my wife. My family is real. My sobriety is real. The work I do every day to be better than I was yesterday is real. But you know what's not real? This version of journalism where you attack your guests and call it serving the public. Joy's voice became even more shrill. Oh, so now I'm the bad guy for asking hard questions? You come on this show? You want to promote your movie? You want to sell tickets? But you don't want to answer for your past or your positions. That's not how it works. Hard questions? Robert stood up slightly in his chair, his composure finally cracking in a way that showed real anger. Joy, you want a hard question? Here's one. How do you look at yourself in the mirror every morning knowing that your job has become tearing down people who are trying to do better? How do you justify turning recovery into a punchline and personal growth into a conspiracy theory. The studio was dead silent. Even the camera operators seemed to be holding their breath. Joy's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water before she managed to speak. I don't have to justify anything to you. I've been asking tough questions for decades, and I'm not going to stop now just because some movie star doesn't like being held accountable. Held accountable for what? Robert's voice exploded through the studio. For being human? For making mistakes and learning from them? For building a life and a family and a career based on honesty about my past? Joy, if that's what you call being held accountable, then what do you call what you're doing right now? Because from where I sit, it looks like bullying disguised as journalism. Joy slammed her hand on the desk. I am not a bully. I am asking the questions that need to be asked. No, you're not. Robert shot back immediately. You're not asking questions, Joy. You're making accusations. You're not seeking truth. You're creating conflict. And you know what the really sad part is? You're so focused on trying to tear me down that you've completely lost sight of what actual journalism looks like. Sarah tried to jump in. Maybe we can redirect this conversation. But Joy wasn't finished. Don't you dare try to teach me about journalism, Robert. I've been holding powerful people accountable when you were still getting arrested for drug possession. The words hit the studio like a slap. Robert went completely still, his face changing in a way that made everyone in the room suddenly very aware that they were watching something unprecedented unfold. There it is, Robert said quietly, his voice deadly calm. There's the real Joy Behar. When the fake journalism doesn't work, when the pretend accountability doesn't stick, you go straight for the personal attack. You use someone's lowest moment as a weapon because you can't actually make your point any other way. Joy tried to backtrack. I was just stating a fact. No, Robert interrupted, his voice cutting through her excuse like a knife. You were being cruel. And you know what, Joy? I've been sober for over 15 years. I've rebuilt my entire life. I've been a good father, a good husband, and a productive member of society. But in your world, none of that matters because you'd rather focus on who I was at my worst than acknowledge who I've become at my best. Joy's face was now bright red, but she pressed on with her attack. And what about the people who never got the second chances you got? What about the people who didn't have Hollywood connections and million-dollar lawyers to help them through their problems? Robert paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that seemed to fill the entire studio. You know what, Joy? You're absolutely right. I was privileged. I had resources that other people don't have. I had support systems that not everyone gets. And you know what I do with that knowledge? I try to help other people who are struggling with the same issues I faced. I work with rehabilitation programs. I fund scholarships for people in recovery. But none of that fits your narrative, does it? None of that serves your need to turn this into a gotcha moment. That's not what I'm doing, Joy protested weakly. Then what are you doing? Robert demanded. Because I came here to talk about a movie, to entertain your audience, to have a conversation. Instead, you've spent the entire time trying to relitigate my past and question my authenticity. And for what? What's the endgame here, Joy? What are you hoping to accomplish besides humiliating someone on live television? Joy's voice cracked slightly. I'm trying to get real answers from someone who spent years crafting a public image. Robert leaned forward, his eyes blazing. Joy, my public image is that I'm a recovering addict who made terrible mistakes and spent years fixing them. That's not crafted, that's just honest. But your public image is that you're a journalist who asks tough questions. And right now, you're destroying that image because everyone watching can see that you're not interested in truth, you're interested in blood. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Joy's face went through a series of expressions, from shock to anger, to something that looked almost like panic. She had pushed this confrontation to its breaking point, and now she was facing the consequences. That's enough, Joy said, her voice shaking with rage. I don't have to sit here and be insulted by someone who thinks their celebrity status puts them above criticism. Robert's laugh was cold and sharp. Above criticism? Joy, I've been criticized by everyone from movie reviewers to congressional committees. The difference is, they actually had something substantive to say. You're not criticizing me, you're attacking me. And there's a massive difference that apparently you're too blinded by your own agenda to see. My agenda? Joy's voice hit a pitch that made everyone in the studio wince. My agenda is holding celebrities accountable when they think they can just waltz in here and charm their way through an interview without answering real questions. Real questions? Robert stood up from his chair, and for a moment, it looked like he might actually walk off the set. Joy, let me tell you what a real question sounds like. A real question would be, How has your experience with addiction informed your approach to playing these heroic characters? A real question would be, what do you hope audiences take away from your story of recovery? Those are real questions. What you've been doing is character assassination disguised as journalism. Whoopi tried desperately to regain control. Robert, Joy, maybe we should. But Joy cut her off again, her voice becoming even more aggressive. Don't tell me how to do my job. I've been asking hard questions longer than most people in this business, and I'm not going to stop because some privileged actor doesn't like being challenged. Robert turned to face Joy directly, his eyes flashing with an intensity that made the studio lights seem dim by comparison. Privileged? Joy? You want to talk about privilege? Let's talk about the privilege of having a platform like this and using it to bully your guests. Let's talk about the privilege of hiding behind the pretense of journalism while you indulge in personal vendettas. Because that's what this is, isn't it? This isn't about me or my past or my politics. This is about you needing to feel powerful by tearing someone down on live television. How dare you? Joy sputtered, but there was less conviction in her voice now. How dare I what? Robert shot back immediately. How dare I call out bad behavior when I see it? How dare I refuse to let you turn my recovery into entertainment? How dare I expect basic human decency from someone who claims to be a professional? Joy, I've spent years learning to recognize toxic behavior, and right now, you're exhibiting every single warning sign. The accusation hit like a thunderbolt. Joy's face went pale, then red again, cycling through emotions so quickly it was hard to follow. You don't know anything about me, she said, her voice barely controlled. I know what I'm seeing right now, Robert replied, his voice steady and devastating. I'm seeing someone who's so desperate to create a moment that she's willing to sacrifice her integrity and her guests' dignity. I'm seeing someone who's forgotten that the people she interviews are human beings, not just content for her show. Joy tried to rally. I treat everyone the same way. I ask everyone tough questions. No, you don't, Robert said firmly. I've watched this show, Joy. I've seen you fawn over politicians you agree with. I've seen you softball interview celebrities you like. This isn't about tough questions. This is about you deciding to make me a target, and honestly, I think your viewers deserve to know why. I don't owe you or anyone else an explanation for how I conduct my interviews, Joy snapped. Robert smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. You're right. You don't owe me an explanation. But you owe your viewers one. You owe them an explanation for why you brought someone on this show under the pretense of promoting their work, only to ambush them with personal attacks. You owe them an explanation for why you think this is what journalism looks like. Sarah made another attempt to intervene. Maybe we should move on to talking about Robert's new project. But Joy wasn't finished. Fine, you want to know why? Because I'm tired of celebrities thinking they can control the narrative. I'm tired of actors coming on shows like this expecting softball questions while they make millions playing heroes they could never be in real life. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Robert nodded slowly, as if Joy had just confirmed everything he'd suspected. There it is, he said quietly. The truth. This was never about journalism or accountability or serving the public. This was about your personal resentment toward people in my profession. You decided before I even walked in here that you were going to take me down, and you've spent this entire interview trying to justify that decision. Joy's voice cracked. That's not true. Isn't it? Robert challenged. Joy, every question you've asked has been designed to make me look bad. Every response I've given, you've twisted into something negative. You've taken my openness about my past and turned it into a weapon against me. If that's not personal resentment, then what is it? It's holding you accountable, Joy repeated, but the words sounded hollow now. Robert shook his head sadly. No, Joy, it's not. Accountability would be asking me about my actions and giving me a chance to explain them. Accountability would be challenging my answers with facts, not with accusations. What you've done here is tried to humiliate me because you think it will make good television. And you know what the saddest part is? It probably will. People will watch this, and they'll share it, and they'll talk about it, and you'll probably call that a success. Joy's silence was deafening. Robert continued, his voice gaining strength. But here's what I hope people take away from this. I hope they see the difference between legitimate criticism and personal attack. I hope they understand that accountability doesn't require cruelty. And I hope they remember that everyone, even celebrities, even people who've made mistakes, deserves to be treated with basic human dignity. He stood up fully now, clearly preparing to leave. Joy, I came here today to talk about a project I'm passionate about, to connect with an audience that's been incredibly supportive of my work. Instead, I've spent the last 20 minutes defending my sobriety, my family, and my character against attacks that have nothing to do with anything I've actually done wrong. That's not journalism, that's not accountability, and it's certainly not entertainment. It's just sad. Joy made one last desperate attempt. You can't just walk away when you don't like the questions. Robert paused at the edge of his chair and looked back at her. Joy, these weren't questions, they were attacks. And yes, I can walk away from attacks. I've learned that I don't have to accept toxic behavior from anyone, no matter what platform they have or what justification they give. That's actually one of the most important things recovery taught me. He looked directly into the camera. To everyone watching at home, thank you for your support over the years. Thank you for believing in second chances, and for understanding that people can change and grow. And remember, you don't have to accept being treated poorly by anyone, no matter who they are or what title they have. Robert began to remove his microphone, his movements deliberate and final. Joy made one last desperate play. This is exactly what I was talking about. You can't handle real scrutiny, so you run away. Robert stopped and turned back to her one final time. Joy, if you think what happened here today was scrutiny, then you don't understand what that word means. Real scrutiny involves facts, evidence, and fair questioning. What you did was launch personal attacks, and then hide behind the pretense of journalism when you got called out for it. The difference is important, and I hope someday you figure that out. With that, Robert Downey Jr walked off the View set, leaving behind a stunned audience, mortified co-hosts, and one very quiet Joy Behar, who finally seemed to understand that she had just made a terrible mistake on live television. The cameras kept rolling for a few more seconds, capturing the awkward silence that followed, before finally cutting to commercial. When they returned, Joy was noticeably absent from the panel, and Whoopi was left to salvage what remained of the show. What started as a routine celebrity interview had become a masterclass in how not to conduct journalism,